There are several life cycle events that occur in this week's parasha. The beginning of the parasha, and essentially what gives the parasha its name, is Sarah dies. And she is buried by Avraham Avinu. He buys the first piece of land in Eretz Canaan, what will later become Eretz Israel, as a burial plot. Before then, he doesn't own any land in Canaan. Yitzhak gets married, and the ordeal of Yitzhak getting married is quite elaborate. It takes up the majority of the parasha. Avraham gets married again to Keturah, and ultimately Avraham dies as well at the end of the parasha, and his children, Yitzhak and Ishmael, bury him. What I'd like to look at this week is a specific element of the elaborate story that goes into finding a wife for Yitzhak. And that is, after the servant of Abraham is sent by Abraham back to his old stomping grounds, right, to where his family lives, Lavan and Betuel, to find a wife for Yitzhak, being warned very carefully that he should not bring Yitzhak with him, and Yitzhak is not to return there. Rather, he's supposed to go there, find a wife, and bring back, the wife to Yitzhak. He does so, and there's an elaborate development with regards to that, which I'm not going to get into the details this time, but I encourage you to have a look, because there's this dialogue that the servant has with God, kind of asking for signs, how it is that he's supposed to find this woman. The signs seem to be quite meaningful, and it seems to be that God responds to the request, and he finds Rivka, who, of course, is Rivka, will later become Rivka Imenu. And he speaks, the servant then goes in and he has gifts and tells this entire story over again to the father and brother, the family of Rivka. And they are, enthralled by the story and say, well, this is obviously from God. I mean, she's the right wife for your master. And so, she should go home. She should go back with you. You should take her. And what they say to her is, read this to you. So they say, this is in Perek Kaf Daled, Pasuk Nun Aleph, 24:51 in Bereshit, in Genesis. And they say, look, this is obviously all from God. You should take her and go. And she should be Isha leben Adonecha. She should be a wife to the son of your master. So this is Kasher Diber Adonai, just as God has spoken, right? That this is basically God saying, carry through, carry forward. This is what should carry on. This is what it is that should be done. And the next bit is the bit that I want to focus on, and that is that after they say, well, you should take her and she should become a wife to your master's son, they then say, Tishev hana'ara itanu yamimo asor. They say, after they have dinner and they sit and eat and all of that, they say, why doesn't she wait with us? Literally translated, days or 10. And it's interesting because the Hachamim in Masechet Ketubot and the Talmud have a discussion about what exactly that means. What is days and 10? And they say, well, days isn't 2 days and 10 isn't 10 days. People don't really talk like that. I mean, even if they're saying 2 days, they would say 2 days, right? So it's weird that that's what they're talking about. They say days means a year, and Asor means 10 months in order to prepare her for the wedding. And it's clear here that there is some kind of procrastination that is beginning to come into the fold. So even though they say, oh yeah, take her, she should be the wife, they then bring this element in that says, why don't we wait a little while? Why don't we wait a long while until it's time? And that's an interesting one, because on the surface it would seem, well, what's the big deal? I mean, what does it matter if she comes, 10 months or a year or whatever it is? If it's a matter of getting ready for the wedding, then let her get ready for the wedding. But the servant of Abraham Abinu says to them, Al tahiru oti. He said, well, don't give me this. Don't give me this. Right? Don't start, basically, is what he says. Don't delay me. He says, Vadonai hitzliach darki. He says, God has succeeded, has made my way successful. That's an interesting and important detail he adds there, right? He says, don't delay me. Why? Because God has made my way successful, which is essentially another way of saying, I have a green light. We have a green light in order to be able to bring this through. Don't delay me, right? Why would I slow down towards a green light? You don't slow down towards a green light. And he says, Shalahuni ve'lecha laduni. He says, send me so that I can go. So they say, okay, well, why don't we ask her? So they're hoping, it would seem, from the simple, reading of the pasuk, it would seem that when they say, why don't we ask her, what they're really saying is, hopefully she will not want to go immediately. I mean, she'll want to hang out and stay home, and they do ask her. Vayamru nikra lanara, let's call her. Vaykru Rivka, they call Rivka, and they ask her. Hatirchi ma'isha zeh. They say, are you going to go with this man? Right? Now that's also an interesting question, because they don't say, do you want to go or do you want to wait? They say, do you want to go with him? Which already reveals that there was an attempt and an interest to keep her there and ultimately get things to move to their turf, as opposed to sending her away on Abraham's turf, which is the major warning that Abraham gives. Don't bring my son back there. And she just simply says, she just simply says in one word, Elech. I'm going. I'm out of here. So there is no friction whatsoever on Rivka's part with regards to this. She is completely and utterly invested and sold on this endeavor. And so she says, I'm going. I'm leaving. Well, and when they realize that, look, they don't try any further, and they send her off. So, and they bless her and they send her off. And I think that this is an important element of the story that teaches us something about our own lives, and that is the issue of procrastination and delaying what we know is good for us in our life, what we know is important for us to do in our life, and yet we don't do, or we delay doing. And I wanted to think about that a little bit, because the parasha here, and look, I mean, it's an ideal that the Hachamim recognize in many, many situations, in many cases. The Hachamim speak about it in terms of zirizut, right, which is alacrity or diligence, right, to do things with, not just with speed, but without delay, when you know that they are the right thing to do, when you know it's what it is that is right for you to do in your life. Now, it's understandable when we're not sure about what it is that we should do in our life. That's obviously reason for pushing things off and procrastination. And that's why it's important to see here, nobody disagrees in this scenario that this is the right thing to do. Even Rivka's family say, well, I mean, this is from God. And of course she should be the wife of your master's son. And in the response to the why doesn't she wait for a year or 10 months that the servant of Abraham says, is he says, God has shown me my way, right? He's clearly shown me that this is the right path. So everybody agrees this is the right thing to do, which makes the delay and procrastination almost a case of insanity, right? You can understand that the reason they're trying to delay, the family of Rivka is trying to delay, is because they actually want her to stay and they have the leverage. And so if they can somehow move the weight of the event into their territory, it will be much harder for them to be able to leave. I can't tell you, how many times people have said to me, I think it's happened in my own life, I was going for just a few months and I ended up staying there for 20 years or whatever the case may be. That may or may not be a good thing, right? Who knows? But at the end of the day, when issues come to us that we know are good for us, we know are the right things for us to do, whether it is going to the gym, whether it is doing a mitzvah, whether it is studying, whether it is completing important work that we need to do, whether it is making a call, whether it is, seeing somebody, making amends, whatever it may be, there is never an end for the great majority of us of things that come to us in our life that we recognize very clearly they are things that we should do, and yet we procrastinate and don't do them. And what we read in this story is a great attribute of the Avot. And it seems like not such a major thing, but it's a major thing. It's one of the clear attributes of the Avot that the Hachamim recognize over and over again. And I think that the way that it's presented in this story here is beautiful and clear. And that is that Rivka knows that this is what it is that she is meant to do in her life. And being that she knows that this is what it is that she's meant to do in her life, she doesn't delay. She doesn't even discuss it further. They say, do you want to go with this man? And she says, Elech, I'm going. No caveats. No, well, I think. None of that. It's, I'm going. I'm out of here. And they leave right away. And the same thing with the servant of Abraham, right? The servant of Abraham, the Hachamim recognizes no slouch, yeah? I mean, his dialogue in this week's parasha takes up a massive amount of pesukim, and the Hachamim very famously recognize, that Yafeh sihatam shel abdei avot mi ma'asav shel banim, right? The language of the servants of the avot is greater than the deeds of the children, right? Which is an interesting insight. But nonetheless, I mean, this is a person that is living in Abraham's house intimately, right hand of Abraham. This is a person who is basically apprenticing with Abraham Avinu very, very directly. And he's very clear on the fact, don't delay me. Don't hold me back. We need to get through and do this. There's no reason for the delay. And Rivka does the same. And so recognizing that this is a major attribute of our Avot, that when things come to them that are the right thing to do, there is no delay. And we see this also with Abraham Avinu himself. He's told by Sarah to send Hagar away with Ishmael. And we know that this is a tremendously negative thing for him personally. The Pasuk says very, very clearly that he saw this as being terrible, terrible. And that only because it's endorsed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that God himself says to Abraham Avinu, listen to whatever it is that Sarah says to you to do. Abraham does it. And you would expect if there was going to be a situation in which Abraham might procrastinate, or a situation in which Abraham might not do what it is that he needs to do, it would be this one. I mean, he doesn't want to send his son away. He doesn't want to send even the concubine with his son away. But it says, Vayishkem Abraham baboker. And Abraham got up first thing in the morning, the next day, and did it without delay. So that's a huge thing. And it's something that we recognize as being one of the powerful attributes of the patriarchs and matriarchs. And here we see it in Rivka Imenu, our great matriarch Rivka. And so given that that's the case, I do think that it's important for us to think about that as well in terms of how it is that it manifests in our lives. Because all of us procrastinate at one point or another. This is actually something that the Ramchal is quite well known for. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, 18th century Hacham, born in Italy. And he writes a very famous Sefer Mesidai Yesharim, which is a guide essentially for human refinement, essentially for the Jewish people that are living in covenant with God. And he does this as like a step-by-step guide. It's not an easy thing to do because he really does bring things up until their very, very highest ideals. But at the very beginning of the book, he talks about two attributes. He talks about zihirut, which is basically taking care and being careful about things, right? That when I know that I'm not supposed to do something, to be very careful around that thing and not doing it. And then the next thing that he speaks about is zirizut, which means alacrity or diligence. To do something with verve, right? And that is around the things that we should do, that we know that are good for us to do. And he points out, as I was saying, there are many things in life that we know are good for us, and we don't do them. That we know are important for us, and we either don't do them or we really delay in doing them. Now, what he does there is he just simply says, look, don't do this. You've got to be strong about it and push yourself and get through it. But I think that it's important to be able to really go a bit deeper and have a bit of an understanding of why we do this. In other words, what are the psychological, emotional, logistical reasons why we procrastinate? Because I think that we know when there's something that we want to do and we are excited about, we don't procrastinate. We do it immediately. So the question becomes, when I know there's something good for me, what's holding me back from doing it? Yeah. So if we say, doing a mitzvah, and I know that I have an opportunity to be able to do a mitzvah, is it just laziness? And really, is there such a thing as laziness? So one of the things that the Ramchal says, look, it's our nature, right? Our nature is to be lethargic. Our nature is to be, not to get up and do things quickly. And there is a certain reality to that because our brains are wired for least resistance in order to be able to preserve energy. So we will always take the path of least resistance. And if I have to think about the fact that I need to go to the gym and I have to exert myself, right? Or I have to, lift very heavy objects in order to be able to or both, in order to be able to maintain my health, that is definitely something that, the brain is going to say, really? I mean, do we need to do it? Do we need to do it now? Didn't you do that last week? Did you do it 2 days ago? I mean, how do we have to? And he points out in the Mesilah, he says, there's always all kinds of reasons that we'll give ourselves that, keep us from being able to do it. And at the end of the day, we still know at the bottom of it all, it's good for us. And it's something that we should do. And we have the resistance on, because of the exertion that is required in order to be able to do it. So that's one reason why we procrastinate. And it's important to think about, right? What is keeping me from doing what it is that I need to do? Is it just the exertion? Maybe that's what it is. It could be that I don't feel like doing the effort. I don't feel like getting out of breath. I don't feel like getting out of the house. I don't feel like really exerting myself in that way. And because we have a difficulty with regard to time perception as human beings as well, in other words, I am much more in tune with the person I am as opposed to the person I'm going to be. So it's very difficult for me, right, for all of us, to envision the person that I will be in the future if I keep what it is that I need to do now, right? The results that ultimately it will give me. And that is difficult, right? And that's something that just part of human nature, it keeps us from doing. And so one thing that is important is to be able to find the motivation to be able to do it, but it's more than motivation. It's behavioral. If we can give ourselves rules as opposed to relying on willpower in order to be able to do these things, it's much more effective. What do I mean by that? If let's say, I need to be able to eat, something, right? Or I need to be able to take vitamins, or I need to be able to go and get something for myself, whatever the case may be. If I give a rule to it and I say, I do this thing, it's one of the things that I do in my life, as opposed to I'm going to try to do this thing, right? That's a very big difference psychologically, right? So if I know that I need to go out and run, or I know that I need to stretch, or I need to exercise, as an example, so then you make it as a rule in your calendar. I have to do this at this period of time, at this time, right? And I put it in the calendar, and I recognize that it's not that I'm going to try to do, I'm not going to muster my motivation. It's an appointment, and I have to be able to attend the appointment in the way that I would any other appointment. And the same is true with things that I don't want to do, right? I'm going to try to keep from eating sugar. Well, it's very different than saying, I don't eat sugar. It's not something that I do. So it's a psychological tactic, but it is more effective than simply relying on willpower. Willpower is much weaker than we tend to allow, we tend to believe it to be. So that's one thing, just in terms of logistics. But there's also psychological inhibitors in terms of why it is that we keep from doing things, like emotional elements, right? The reason why we may keep from doing things, and this already comes closer to the scenario in our parasha, is that maybe I have anxiety about it, right? Rivka had absolutely no idea what was waiting for her at Abraham's house, or who Yitzhak was as a person. She had absolutely no idea. And it would be completely understandable to procrastinate in that situation, to say, well, I'm not sure, right? Now, the funny thing about procrastination is that eventually we've got to go there. And so it logically doesn't make a lot of sense that we don't do it. Because, I mean, why not do it now when you know that you're going to have to do it in a week or 2 weeks from now? Yeah, ultimately. We keep from doing those things because of anxiety, because of uncertainty. And that's very much understandable, a reason why Rivka would not have gone. There's also issues of inadequacy that we feel. When I do this, how will I be seen? If I go into doing this, what will it mean for me? What if I fail? That we could also understand as a potential for Rivka, which tells us on the one hand that Rivka did not give in to any feelings of inadequacy, if she even had any. I mean, it's very likely that she was very confident in herself and that she didn't feel that, right? She goes into this with gusto. And that if she felt any anxiety at all, she was able to recognize the right thing to do is to go and do this because it's the right thing for me to do, regardless of the anxiety that I feel. That's a powerful thing. That's something that we recognize amongst the greatest of people. And that's who she is. Right? So some of the things that we can do in order to be able to help us is to be able to recognize, to notice what's keeping me from doing what it is that I need to do. Is it indeed anxiety? Do I feel uncomfortable about this action or this task or this element that I need to be able to do? And why? And one of the ways that's helpful to deal with that is to put language to it, to speak it out, to say, I'm feeling anxious about this because I feel like I don't know what's going to happen. And so I'm keeping from doing it. Right? I'm afraid of making the call to this individual. I don't know what they're going to say to me when I do make the call. Right? And this happens a lot. People tell me, when they have to make a visit for bereavement, right? If somebody has lost a loved one and they're mourning. Many people procrastinate in calling or going to see the person because they don't know what to say. And a lot of times it's helpful just to be able to recognize, I think I'm keeping from going because I don't know what to say. And the truth of the matter is that it's not as important what you say as it is being there or showing up in that situation. It's just an example, right? Oftentimes the less you say, the better. Yeah, but just showing up and being there and saying, I'm so sorry, matters. So giving language to the emotional restrictions makes a very, very big difference. And then finally, there's psychological frictions that occur for us, right? That we have trouble with, right? Oftentimes, this is something that I experience very often. If I have a task in front of me that I am unclear about the logistics, how am I actually going to do this, right? What are the details involved? I procrastinate. And I don't even do it consciously, I do it almost subconsciously because I recognize, and it takes me time to kind of notice the recognition of the fact that I have no idea how it is that I'm supposed to do this. I don't even know the first step in being able to do this, right? That's a psychological friction, or one might even say an element of logistical friction, right? And saying, look, I just don't know what it is that I need to do in order to be able to move forward. And we procrastinate because of that. And if that's what's going on, oftentimes it's helpful just to start, to do the first easy thing. It's like a gateway move, right? Just get into doing it. Just begin one task, right? Make a phone call. Maybe it's ask a person what I need to do in order to be able to do this. But that will already get the ball rolling, and that will help us from doing so. Now, this might seem like very mundane issues of life, but my point about this is it's displayed in the stories of our avot, of our forefathers, of our matriarchs and our patriarchs, more than once. Entire chapters in the book of Mesilat Yesharim are dedicated to this. And there's something about the recognition of the fact that God has opened a path for you to do something, to achieve something, to move forward with something, no matter how mundane it might be in your life. And what the Torah teaches us about that is that when you know that there is a green light in front of you, don't slow down on your way to the green light. You can keep moving. And when that's the case, and when we're able to do that, that's genuinely an attribute of our abot, of the matriarchs and the patriarchs of our people. And it's something that we should espouse, so that we can recognize that we are walking through this life with God, and that when He green lights something, we don't slow down. We move straight forward into it. And so those are just some tactics that we can think of, and that, possibly there's many more that we can that a person can discover, but those are some tactics that we can use in order to be able to move forward when God is green lighting something for us in our lives, as opposed to holding, right? To be aware of ourselves, to understand why it is that we might hold back from doing something. And I wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom. And if you enjoy these parasha discussions, please do subscribe and like and share with others, so the Divrei Torah can get to everyone.